Chicken on a Bone. That was the first. We actually recorded this first of all with a friend of mine called Brian, who's based in New York, who I grew up with. He actually was the guy that recorded Two Colours, that 2-track thing, which is not the best of recordings, to be honest. We did a version of this song on there anyway. It never really worked.
Well, that was one of the first things put out.
Yeah, well, it was, and people pay. I saw a fan the other week who paid 60 quid for it. They are, when there was hardly any made. I think it was 500 or 1,000 made. We used to sell them at gigs. Just trying to get rid of them. I wasn't, we were almost. It really was just like, we aren't going to put this out, so let's just sort of get rid of them really. But they've become like very sort of collectible. But anyway, but we did the first attempt of it then, and we messed around with it a lot, and I think we kind of sort of lost the whole essence of the song really, and we were never really happy with it, but we thought it was a great song. It was always a really popular song with fans. It was just one that just seemed to sort of rock live. It was really intense, and it had that sort of. I was trying to sort of. I thought it was really. I just thought it was really original, that song. Okay, it's rock, it's got heavy guitars, and it's got a bizarre, like vocal and stuff. I just thought the whole like structure of it was I just thought it was quite unique. And that's why we actually bothered to re-record it. And also I remember it was one of Chris Sheldon's favourite songs after hearing this live. And I wasn't going to actually redo it, because I was like, I've really had enough of Chicken on a Bone, yeah. But it's one we actually tried again, and although I'm much happier, with this version. Whether we got it right, I'm not sure, but it certainly was much better than the original one. Still a song that people ask now, when they play it live anymore. So yeah, that was one of the very early tracks. That was the stuff we got signed on, all that kind of stuff when that song was written. Just sort of. The whole thing was, really, the whole idea was just sort of being a small fish in a big sea. Really, moving up from Wales, I was in London. It was a nightmare when I first, because I didn't know anyone. And I was just sort of, I think I spent a lot of time just sort of like wandering around after leaving the studio, and just sort of, trying to get the band going and stuff. And that was a song that just seemed to come along from that, really. I'm not sure why I called it Chicken on a Bone. I don't even know. I know I had a reason for it. I think it was just sort of the fact that I was sort of easy prey or something. I don't know. The little town boy in the big city. But it was quite an angry song that had a really positive chorus, and it suddenly went to this sort of quite a nice melody in the chorus, which you weren't expecting from that heavy let it out, sort of letting your frustration out, and then you had this nice calming chorus that was
a theme developing.
That is kind of our thing really, and that's what we've always done. I know there's obviously each record's been different, but there's always been an element of that in all our stuff, I think, anyway. Possibly this stuff was a bit more intense than some of our later stuff, but it's still there. Descend. I think it was probably one of the strongest songs on this package. Anyway, quite dark. I don't think I was in the most happy of moods when I wrote that song. But it was one that I started using a lot of falsetto, which was something which really came from anything from the Beatles, and even some of the Bono stuff. The way he was using his voice in U2, and I'm not a big fan of all their stuff, but I quite like the way he used his voice. That kind of gave me the idea to do that falsetto, and I think I was doing that quite a long time ago actually. I think I was a little bit ahead of that, because it seems to be every band does falsetto now, doesn't it?
No, nowadays.
And it got to a point where I don't do it very much now, because I just feel as though it seems to be overdone. I think it's great on a certain song. I think on this song it's part of the hook, it is a really important part of the chorus, and it was quite unusual to go from this really heavy bridge, which was, pretty full on, to this quite, it was unusual, and it was just one that just seemed to sort of have a real impact on people. It was always a good live song.
Is it the
It ended up minutes long.
At the start as well. Is it the first sort of feeder epic, I guess?
No, I wrote some epics here before that. I wrote a song called Suffocate, which used to be called Give, and that was the original. That was a song that partly got us our record deal, actually. It was a very acoustic, quite Lennon-y track. That was kind of epic in its own way, but I think this one, in the way it was recorded, it was certainly the most like dramatic. Yeah, so I suppose it is the biggest sort of song we've got, but in quite a dark way. It was somewhere between, I remember people hearing it, they said it's somewhere between, you know, like Radiohead and Black Sabbath, I think someone might describe it once, which is not a bad... It's not the most sort of, you know, cheerful song in the world. It's quite dreamy, quite sort of, you know... it was all done on acoustic. We did it live in the room. It was done at Townhouse, and that was done at the same time as Polythene. I actually wanted that to be on Polythene. I thought it was like a great song, but we just had so many tracks in the air, we couldn't put them all on. You know, again, it shows the more acoustic side. Don't know, a song that, you know, I do remember being really proud of. You know, actually writing it. I haven't heard it for so long. I can't remember what it sounds like. You're Forgiven was, oh, that's really early. That's really fucking old. Isn't that a bizarre track?
Yeah.
With the vocal on it, it's just so...
when did that date
In Your Face and Fragile. That was done the same time as the original Two Colours.
That's ancient Feeder.
Ancient, that's old. But it was a side, you know, that's why people say, oh, Feeder, you know, you used to be heavy, you've got all snow songs. They've always been there. That's what people don't realise, and that's why I find it really confusing, because I was like, well, we had Swim, but that was written ages ago, and I had, you know, quite a few other slow songs as well, you know, tracks, you know, like Suffocate and all those, and Change and all those kind of songs that were quite slow. That song took a long time to, you know, to get right.
How old were you when you wrote it?
35. No.
Jeez, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm talking 10 years ago, yeah. God, I don't know. 25 probably.
When you listen back
24, 25, maybe, yeah, like that.
they sound like the work of a much younger you, or is it
To me, that song sounds quite mature, actually, for example. I'm not saying that, you know, I was being a lyrical genius on it, but it's got a really good... I don't think it's... it doesn't make me cringe, but the way the vocal was recorded was so fragile, I found it difficult to listen to when I did it, but there's something quite unusual about it. I think it's got... It's just got, you know, like a bizarre feel to it. It's like really lazy and very dreamy and almost got a... I don't know, it's got quite a classic feel to it. I think that song could be recorded in a completely different way. It would be quite epic.
Yeah.
You know, you could do it in a very commercial way. I think we were sort of fighting not to make it that way. I think the label probably wanted us to go that way.
If you were going to do it now, would you think you'd do it that way? Or?
I definitely would have AIDS pumping through it, but then you've got to be careful because it may end up sounding like a U2 track or something. I think out of a lot of songs on there, I think it's a song that would be very... If somebody wanted to like cover that song and wanted me to, you know, to redo it for a film or something, I'd be very tempted because I think it's got more to it than possibly that version. But saying that, I think you know, I haven't heard it yet for ages, but I just remember it being quite unusual, very atmospheric, and very long as well. But it was done. That's really, really old, and that was done at Wessex Studio, which is where I did all the Sex Pistols stuff in the same room. I remember it was very difficult to get a good drum sound in there. And we were trying to get this bass drum that sounded like a cannon, so it went on the, you know, when it hit in the chorus, and it, oh god, it was driving us crazy because like Brian, he was trying to get it right, and we were experimenting with different mics, different bass drum sizes, and different like reverbs to get this almost like a gunshot with this sort of low bottom end, and it took, oh god, it took days to get it. You know, whether it was worth the hassle, I don't know. But at the time, you thought we were making, you know, a nice special thing out there.
Nowadays, you must look back and with
yeah.
fond memories.
Saying that though, I think out of the original Chicken on the Bone, what was the other one? What was it called? Pictures of Pain, I think it was. Pictures of Pain was the other one. We did the same with some two colours, and that one. I think that was the mature one, probably, possibly out of the three, and probably the most interesting as far as the production and where we were at that moment in time. But I could be, I might be mistaken. I might go home and listen to it and think,
what a load of rubbish!
What a complete load of shite. But I think it's probably quite a good way to finish that. It's quite an interesting little mix there. Shade, well, very much done at the same period. Again, big riff. I wanted something that was just heavy and almost like a Sabbathy riff. But it has lots of different, it's where I think we start to really find, our early sound. It had a lot of, went from heavy into very light little elements, and that, that on that song in the middle 8, it drops into this really quite sort of psychedelic pop bit, which was quite unusual. But it wasn't unusual, didn't seem unusual to us, but I think that's what people found interesting about it. It was, just a riffy rock song, but it had a few different elements to it, which is, I think, partly why we got the Smashing Pumpkins label, because they were a band who were doing that in some way. But so were Led Zeppelin, many years ago, and so were Black Sabbath, really, on the future. So, just a sort of, I think in those days I was a little, possibly the whole sort of, being a few years younger, you're always a little bit more angry, possibly. So I was probably, following that sort of slight pre-sort of teen thing, really. And there's a little bit of anger in there. I think that, when you do rock a lot of the time, certainly when you're younger, there always seems to be a lot more anger in there, even if it's always not particularly genuine,
Or directed anywhere at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at the new metal scene. I mean,
looking back on a song like Shade, do you think, I wouldn't write that back, or I'd do it differently, or?
I think it rocks. I think that song you could release in America now, people would like it. I really believe that. You might want to tweak the mix. I think lyrically it's in keeping with what what's happening in rock at the moment, certainly with the new rock stuff, and it has good melodies and it does rock, and I think it would sound great on the radio, and I think it's a song which certainly would work in America. I think virtually all these songs would, to be honest. I think I can imagine Stereo World on radio in America. I think like Descend could be massive if it came out in America now. I remember when we put that to radio in America when we were touring, that was almost too heavy for most formats. We were seen as being too heavy, so it was like,
how times have changed.
It's unbelievable. But I still like that element, and maybe next album I might go back and do some heavier riffs. I mean, I don't know. The thing is, I still think there's elements of all of this early stuff in our later stuff. It's just done in a different way. Otherwise, it's like you're making the same record over and over again, doing the same thing, and it's boring. I might work with Chris Sheldon again and go for that massive guitar thing on the next album. I don't know. Who knows? But I think that's kind of where we were at as a band then. We were very much live. It was very much about the live thing as well, and being as loud as we possibly could, being the heaviest, and just being sort of heavy but cool within, good melodies. That's what we were, really trying to do. I do think that some of the early Feeder stuff has certainly influenced quite a few UK bands. Some of the new ones coming through. I'm not saying all of them. I do hear the old record on the radio and think, that's got elements.
Like who?
I'm not mentioning.
Oh, go on.
I think it's no, I'm going to say it. I think it's obvious, but Shade, just an all-out balls to all-out rock song, really. Spill was done after this. This was an in-between song. It was done. I think we were doing B-sides. And I just wanted to do something that was really punky, really angry, and something that was a cross between early Police and almost like early Nirvana. I wanted to be garagey, and we just threw it down. And I remember doing it at done at a place called Maison Rouge where we did Yesterday Went Too Soon. So it was done just before that sort of period, really. It was around that time, so it was more of an in-between one. But we just put it on there because we just thought, well, I just want, if there's any kind of new fans and stuff as well who buy this, then I just thought it was quite nice for them to hear that side of us as well, because obviously we do have other songs in that vein, and it just felt, I think that's why we actually went with it on there. But it was very much done live. I remember doing the vocal about 7 in the morning, and I was completely utterly just fucked. We had to get these B-sides done in time, so it was a bit of one of those. So we just sort of threw it down really, but it's so raw. But I think the actual vibe of it has a lot of energy. I think it actually captures our energy as a band, not so much maybe in the song, but just in the actual performance, and more than most of the other tracks we've done.
So is that probably the only one on there that was written deliberately as a B-side?
Well, no, I mean, I didn't really. I write everything's a B-side really when I write them. I mean, I don't really think that's the single, that's the one. I mean, honestly, I don't think that way. Even with the latest stuff, people go, "Oh, you must have got audio." I was like, no, I wouldn't. I mean, I didn't know. I just thought I was just having fun with words, just being like stupid and just writing some silly, simple pop things that were always going to be changed at some point, and some did get changed and some didn't.
Do you not differentiate between an album track and a B-side track? No.
Well, I love our B-sides. I actually prefer a lot of the B-sides to the album tracks, because album tracks are always there's always a little bit like you have to be a little bit kind of open to what people like at the label and what the band likes and what sort of mates like or whatever. So there's always a little bit of
more freedom on it.
There's much more freedom on B-sides. Yeah, on the album's a bit more. Although saying that, we do. We've never been told you have to put that on the album. We could have said no, we don't want that. I just think there's times where I've given in and made something a B-side where I think it should have been on an album, but I think you probably could ask that to every band, they'd say the same thing. But as long as people get to hear them, then I think that's more important. And as long as we can remember how to play them. But some songs, Spill, I have to admit, Spill was done with a B-side in mind, I was thinking. Because it was in between, it wasn't done as part of an album. Project. I think it's obvious when it's a B-side, you only go in and you say, okay, we haven't got any B-sides for the next singles, and there has been some like that, certainly recently as well, but out of all those on there, I think that was the only one that was done possibly with B-side in mind. And I think you can probably hear that just in the way it was recorded. It's very raw and quick. Something good about that, but if you compare it to the production on the others, it's probably a little bit more, lo-fi. Don't mean it in a sort of big-headed way, but I think this album and that period of Feeder was quite ahead of its time for a UK band. There wasn't really many people doing that. In fact, there wasn't anyone doing it in the same way. The nearest. It was when Skunk Anansie just got signed, and it was that whole. There was people like Rub Ultra around us. Yeah, it was just sort of a lot of those bands were around, and we were sort of doing the rock thing, and it was very uncool at the time to be in the rock. Well, not even uncool. It wasn't happening in the UK, and we were sort of. I've always liked my sort of pop melodies, but I wanted to be as heavy as you like on the guitar front, and that was kind of what was going on. Kind of with us really at that time. But I think the difference between us and a few of the other bands then, we had, I think the actual melodies were a little bit more poppy, a little bit stronger possibly. Our Stereo World, I still hear it now. I probably wouldn't record it in the same way if I did it now, but I still think it would sound kind of in keeping with what we're doing now.
It would fit on Echo.
Oh yeah, easily. I think it really really kind of quite a unique little song, really, Stereo World. Still quite fond of that one. It was just the whole kind of your sort of dreams, your sort of kind of state of mind, when you're dreaming, really. That was the whole sort of back to reality, and then into sort of whether you're having, I don't know, it can be all sorts of images, but that was kind of what I was trying to, that's where I was coming from in the chorus. Life in a stereo world. Stereo actually means real. I think that's the true meaning of the word stereo. But I was using the word as a stereo as being sort of these two separate kind of states of mind, or two different kind of ways of life, and that was kind of where I was coming from, if I remember right. It was a long time ago. Obviously, Sweet 16 is a very old Feeder track. It was one that was a song that made Chris Sheldon really want to do the album. Apparently, I did a demo I did like a live recording of us in the rehearsal room, and then kind of overdubbed the other vocals at home on my 4-track, and it just had a really good vibe to it. I remember I was trying to do like a rock track that had almost like a sort of Sabotage sort of feel to it, so it had a riff. Didn't really end up sounding like that, but that was kind of what was in my mind. Yeah, I kind of wanted to have not like a rap thing, but almost like a sort of, I was sort of going for that almost like delayed vocal, quite sort of, James Addiction, sort of early James Addiction vibe on it, but with a big riff. And it ended up being a little bit more rock, a little bit more kind of, on the guitar front than I originally sort of kind of envisaged it. It was meant to be almost more like just the bass being distorted and just like this little ranty vocal. But it was it was just a really popular song, a lot of fun to do. I mean, the song really was based on somebody I used to work with. It was obviously, I think it's pretty obvious what it's about, a little bit of incest going on there. And it was just basically about that. I used to work with somebody, and he didn't actually admit to me that it was going on, but it was pretty obvious it was. When I used to be a community visitor. That's when I was living in Wales. I was about sort of 17. And it was just a little bit weird at the time, a little bit like disturbing. So basically, that was what I was writing about, really, based on her, really.
Wow.
I won't give any names because she might be.
Might come around and see you.
Yeah, or Dad might come and kill me. Well, it was the acoustic side, really, of what we did, and that's kind of, I've always been into sort of that sort of simplicity, that kind of Lennon thing. As I went for the sort of slap back on the voice.
Yeah.
Which, you've always got your heroes, haven't you? And I just loved that sort of simplicity, that real just acoustic and vocal. And I was really nervous about doing that song, so I was like, I hated hearing my voice, just with an acoustic. I remember Chris saying, it sounds great, and it's, and it shows a different side, because I had like as many songs like Swim at that time as I did heavy songs. It's just that we decided just to put one on there just to let people know that there was that side to us as well. It was just done live. And we just put the slap back on the voice afterwards.
Wow.
It's a pretty shaky performance, but I think it's
an honest performance.
It is honest, and that's possibly why it works. Just really sort of, I think, the whole song really, you can either sort of move on in life, or you can sort of let things sort of, pull you under, sort of thing. I think I was just trying to be positive, really. At that point in the band, it was quite a weird time as well, because we were sort of, we were starting to make some headway, but it was still very up and down. It was like 1 week was great, the next week was like, oh God, what's happening? So it was quite a weird time. So I think that's really sums up kind of where I was in my head at the time, really. Which is pretty much where I am now. The W.I.T, just a really fun, silly song, really. I just thought it had it was more about the music and the riff, really, than the lyrics. It's not really saying anything of any importance. Yeah, there is something behind that, but it's pretty nasty.
Go on.
I don't really want to go into it, to be honest. I was young, I was naive. It was just the whole, what happens to women at a certain time. I'm not going to say anything else. There you go. Again, very much in the sort of vein of Shade, really, isn't it? A big rock song. It was really weird because I was almost like, although it's got a big rock riff, it's got that backward guitar pedal on there as well, so I've only ever used once. But it was a really great sound, even if I did only use it on one song in 10 years.
But it sounded great.
But it took hours to get that sound right. It was a pig to get it right, but we thought it was a really good intro and we used it. But I was just trying to make a big epic rock song again, really. A big riff, but with a really kind of big like chorus. But there's always danger with those kind of rock songs to make them really too pompous, and it is bordering on that, I have to admit. It is a bit pompous.
It's a fine line, though, isn't it?
It's a fine line, but I think we got away with it. I don't know how. Pretty sort of, it's not the most cheerful song. I seem to remember it was sort of based on sort of feelings of sort of suicide and stuff. Not particularly just how I was feeling, but just in general, really, what goes through people's minds. That was where I was, that the world's asleep and no one's really listening to you, feeling sort of quite alone in the situation. That's really what I was writing about. More really, not I wasn't going to, I wasn't about to top myself at that time. It was more sort of trying to put myself in somebody else's, shoes. But yeah, a big epic. Funny enough, I think that was when we signed our publishing deal. A guy did our publishing there was called Miles, and he still does some work with us now. But that was his favourite feeder song of all time.
Really?
Yeah, he still goes on about it now. He's very upset when we don't play it at gigs anymore. We did almost considering putting it in the set just to keep him happy.